Hello and welcome to Mastermind. Tonight is the last of our 16 first-round programs, and once again we are in the Firth Hall of the University of Sheffield. The university now has nearly 9,000 full-time students taking diploma and degree courses in the arts, sciences, medicine, engineering and law. And hoping to graduate to the semi-finals of Mastermind by winning outright tonight are our four contenders, and they are a freelance writer from Cambridge, a civil servant from Harrogate, a postgraduate student from Newcastle, and a local government accountant from Carlisle. And their chosen specialist subjects cover musical theatre, Christopher Isherwood, 20th century astronomy, and David Lloyd George. So, may I have the first contender, please? Your name, please.
James Moore.
Occupation?
I'm a freelance writer.
And your chosen specialized subject?
The British-American musical theatre between 1915 and 1935.
Mr. Moore, you have 2 minutes on the British-American musical theatre between those dates, starting now. Which Noel Coward musical opened in London in July 1929 and contained the memorable song, I'll See You Again?
Wake Up and Dream.
No, Bittersweet. The pianist Billy Mayle wrote the music for Nippy, which opened in 1930. To what does the title refer?
Pass.
Who wrote the music for the 1916 Broadway show See America First?
Cole Porter.
Correct. Into which 1918 musical did Al Jolson later incorporate the songs My Mammy and Swanee, which came to be so identified with him?
Wonderbar.
No, Sinbad. In December 1930, which C.B. Cochran show featured Jesse Matthews singing Dancing on the Ceiling?
Evergreen.
Correct. Which musical written for the Astairs was the first complete score the Gershwin brothers wrote together for Broadway?
Pass.
Which classical composer collaborated with A.P. Herbert on Tantivy Towers, produced at the Lyric Hammersmith in 1931?
Vivian Ellis.
No, Dunhill. What famous waltz song was first heard on Broadway in Harry Tierney's 1919 musical Irene?
Alice Blue Gown.
Correct. In which Broadway show did Helen Kane first sing her famous Boop Boop a Doop song, I Wanna Be Loved by You?
Ziegfeld Follies.
No, Good Boy. In which 1921 musical did the baritone Thorpe Bates bring the house down with the ballad The Fisherman of England?
Pass.
In which 1929 musical with music by Vivian Ellis did Binny Hill sing the popular song Spread a Little Happiness?
Mr. Cinder.
Correct. What was the Monckton and Talbot musical in 1917 that was based on Arthur Pinero's farce The Magistrate?
The Arcadians.
No, The Boy. Which figure in the world of music was celebrated in G.H. Klutzum's musical The Damask Rose?
Pass.
In 1918, in which Rudolph Frimmel musical did Mae West play a vamp called Mame?
The Firefly.
No, Sometime. In which Broadway musical in 1923 did W.C. Fields appear as Professor Eustace McGargle, a medicine man at a fair?
Poppy.
Correct. In which show did Jerome Kern's song Bill reappear after being dropped from the 1918 musical Oh Lady Lady?
Showboat.
Showboat is right. And at the end of that round, Mr. Moore, you have scored 6 points. You passed on 4 the pianist Billy Mayle, who wrote the music for Nippy, which opened in 1930. With the title Nippy, he referred to the waitresses at Lyons Corner Houses. The musical written for the Astairs, which was the first complete score the Gershwin brothers wrote together for Broadway, was Lady Be Good. The 1921 musical, in which the baritone Thorpe Bates brought the house down with the ballad The Fisherman of England, was The Rebel Maid. And the figure in the world of music who was celebrated in G.H. Klutzum's musical The Damask Rose was Chopin. Mr. Moore, thank you very much. And our second contender, please. Your name, please.
Andrew Pantin.
Occupation.
Civil servant.
And your chosen specialized subject.
The life and works of Christopher Isherwood.
Mr. Pantin, you have 2 minutes on the life and works of Christopher Isherwood, starting now. Which English poet first urged Isherwood to join him in Berlin in 1929?
Auden.
Correct. Who was the leader of a string quartet for whom Isherwood acted as secretary when he left Cambridge?
Mangio.
Correct. What was the real name of the Repton School history master portrayed as Mr. Holmes in Lines and Shadows?
Gorse.
No, G.B. Smith. In A Single Man, which English novelist is the subject of a quirky lecture by George at St. Thomas State College?
McNeice.
No, Huxley. Which novel did Isherwood describe as a loosely constructed fictional autobiography, something in the manner of Goodbye to Berlin?
The Lost.
No, Down There on a Visit. Who wrote the dramatized version of the novella Sally Bowles entitled I Am a Camera?
John Van Druten.
Correct. What was the book that Auden and Isherwood completed just before emigrating to America in January 1939?
Condor and the Cows.
No, Journey to a War. For Mr. Norris Changes Trains, which Berlin Institute provided Isherwood with the detail he required to write about the masochistic Mr. Norris?
Institute of... pass.
Which Beatrix Potter character did Isherwood claim his Berlin landlady, Fraulein Turo, strongly resembled?
A rabbit.
No, Mrs. Tiggywinkle. What was the film company that Isherwood satirized in Prater Violet as Imperial Bulldog?
MGM.
No, Gorman British. Which of his novels did Isherwood describe in a letter as terribly slipshod and vulgar and sentimental in a Hollywoodish way?
Mr. Norris.
No, The World in the Evening. To whom did Isherwood dedicate the biography of Ramakrishna and his disciples published in 1965?
Swami Brahmanandra.
Correct. Which unusual London theatre company produced the 3 plays written by Isherwood and Auden?
Pass.
Who was the Austrian film director whom Isherwood called Friedrich Bergmann in his novel Prater Violet?
Viatal.
Correct. Which economist whose wife played the leading lady sponsored Isherwood and Auden's final play On the Frontier?
Lawrence.
No, John Maynard Keynes. What career had Isherwood freshly embarked upon when he began to write the novel The Memorial? And you may answer.
He was a medical student.
He was exactly becoming a doctor. At the end of that round, Mr. Pantin, you have scored 6 points. We'll pass on to, for Mr. Norris Changes Trains, the Berlin Institute, which provided Isherwood with the detail he required to write about the masochistic Mr. Norris, was the Magnus Hirschfeld Sexology Institute. And the unusual London theatre company that produced the 3 plays written by Isherwood and Auden was called Group Theatre. Mr. Panton, thank you very much. And our third contestant, please. Your name, please.
Brian Daugherty,
Occupation.
postgraduate student,
And your chosen specialised subject.
history of 20th century astronomy.
Mr. Daugherty, you have 2 minutes on the history of 20th century astronomy, starting now. Which theory of the origin of the universe was supported by the discoveries of Penzias and Wilson in 1965?
Big Bang,
Correct. What did Clyde Tombaugh discover at the Lowell Observatory in Arizona in 1930?
Pluto,
Correct. Which Cambridge radio astronomer was awarded the 1974 Nobel Prize for Physics for the discovery of the first pulsar in 1967?
Anthony Hewish,
Correct. What was the first X-ray satellite launched by the European Space Agency in 1983?
Exosat,
Correct. In which month of the year does the meteor shower known as the Perseids reach its maximum?
August,
Correct. What are Ishtar Terra and Aphrodite Terra mapped by the Pioneer probes in 1978?
places on Venus.
Correct. In 1931, which engineer, using a radio aerial nickname merry-go-round, discovered that the Milky Way was a source of radio waves?
Jansky,
Correct. What is the name given to the Y-shaped radio telescope completed in 1981 near Socorro in New Mexico?
pass.
What is a conjectural region which seems to be the source from which comets fall inwards towards the sun?
Oort cloud,
Correct. The key property of quasars is that they have an enormous red shift. Who in 1963 discovered this fact about quasars?
ARP,
No, Schmidt. To what property of the stars does the Harvard sequence of spectral classes that reads OBAFG refer?
sorry, can you repeat the question?
Stop the watch. To what property of the stars does the Harvard sequence of spectral classes that reads OBAFG refer? Start the watch.
Well, it's basically the temperature or the
Correct.
spectrum.
What is the name of the quantity which relates the distance of a galaxy to its speed of recession?
Hubble's constant.
Correct. Which space probe approached closest to Halley's Comet?
Vega,
No, Giotto. Which Siberian region was devastated on the 30th of June 1908 when a comet or large meteorite collided with the Earth?
Tunguska,
Correct. What did Project Ozma at the Green Bank Radio Astronomy Observatory aim to do?
search for intelligent life in the
Correct.
universe.
Which astronomer is commemorated in the name given to the largest mass possible for a stable white dwarf star?
Chandrasekhar,
Chandrasekhar is right. At the end of that round, Mr. Daugherty, you have scored 13 points. You'll pass on just one. The name given to the Y-shaped radio telescope completed in 1981 near Socorro in New Mexico is Very Large Array, or VLA. Mr. Daugherty, thank you very much. And our fourth contender, please. Your name, please.
David Steele,
Occupation.
local government accountant.
And your chosen specialised subject.
The life and career of David Lloyd George.
Mr. Steele, you have 2 minutes on the life and career of David Lloyd George, starting now. In which Welsh town did Lloyd George become an article solicitor's clerk?
Portmaddock.
Correct. In what disguise did Lloyd George escape from Birmingham Town Hall in a riot in 1901?
As a policeman.
Correct. Which local Tory landowner was narrowly defeated by Lloyd George in the Carnarvon Boroughs by-election of April 1890?
Ellis Nanny.
Correct. In 1911, under what circumstances did Lloyd George make the acquaintance of his future second wife, Frances Stevenson?
She was asked to act as a tutor to Meghan.
Correct.
George.
In 1912, which newspaper proprietor had a house built for Lloyd George at Walton Heath?
Riddle.
Correct. What post was given to Lloyd George when Asquith formed his coalition government in 1915?
Ministry of Munitions.
Correct. What nickname was given to Lloyd George's personal secretariat, which worked in improvised huts at 10 Downing Street?
The garden suburb.
Correct. In 1921, where in Surrey did Lloyd George purchase the estate which became his chief home in England?
Churt.
Correct. Which future Prime Minister did Lloyd George appoint as Director General of National Service in 1916?
Chamberlain.
Correct. In July 1922, which Duke led the attack on Lloyd George's honours system in the House of Lords?
Pass.
In which official capacity did Lloyd George participate in the investiture of the Prince of Wales in 1911?
Constable of Carnarvon Castle.
Correct. With which country was there an imminent risk of war in the last week of the Lloyd George government?
Turkey.
Correct. In February 1930, which Welsh MP accused Lloyd George of hypocrisy in opposing Labour's coal mines bill?
Bevan.
Correct. What name did Lloyd George give to the multi-party movement for a British New Deal established in 1935?
The Council for Action.
I need more than that.
Organising Prosperity.
No, Council of Action for Peace and Reconstruction. In 1909, where did Lloyd George deliver the speech of which Edward VII complained that it set class against class?
Newcastle.
No, Limehouse in East London. In 1945, when Lloyd George became a peer, from which Welsh river did he take the name of his earldom?
Dwyfor.
Correct. In which city did Lloyd George first define the post-war task as making Britain a fit country for heroes to live in?
Wolverhampton.
Correct. And at the end of that round, Mr. Steele, you have scored 14 points. We'll pass on just the one. In July 1922, the Duke who led the attack on Lloyd George's honours system in the House of Lords was the Duke of Northumberland. Mr. Steele, thank you very much. And that brings us to the end of the first round, the specialised questions round. Let us glance at the scores. And in joint third place on 6 points are James Moore and Andrew Pantin. In second place on 13 points is Brian Daugherty, but in the lead at this halfway stage by 1 point on 14 is David Steele. And on now to the second round, the general knowledge round. And as always, I'll be calling up the contenders in the ascending order of their first round scores, which means that they'll be in exactly the same order as in the first round. So first of all, please may I have James Moore. He's an American from Hollywood, living in Cambridge for the last 3.5 years. He is a freelance writer, took British American musical theatre between 1915 and 1935 to score 6 points. Now, your general knowledge question starting... Now, what's a more common name for the ground nut or earth nut?
Pass.
In boating, what is a painter?
It's a sail.
No, it's a rope. In which month in 1941 did the United States enter the Second World War?
December.
Correct. What name is given to the method of producing three-dimensional images that normally uses lasers?
Hologram.
Correct. At the Diet of Worms in 1521, who reputedly said, "Here I stand, I can do no other"?
Martin Luther.
Correct. Under the rules of golf, what is the maximum number of clubs a player may use during a round?
13.
No, it's 14 now. The Caliph Harun al-Rashid, mentioned in the Arabian Night stories, ruled from which city?
Tehran.
No, Baghdad. A cockatrice or basilisk is a fabulous beast reputed to be capable of killing by what means?
Hugging.
No, by its venomous breath or its glance. What is the meaning of the word persiflage?
Hiding by lots of words.
I'll accept it. It's raillery, frivolous banter. In the 16th century, who overthrew the Aztec Empire and won Mexico for Spain?
Cortez.
Correct. Of which African country is Kinshasa the capital?
Pass.
Which American novelist, author of Main Street and Elmer Gantry, won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1930?
Sinclair Lewis.
Correct. Which Russian ballet caused a riot at its first performance in Paris in 1913?
The Firebird.
No, The Rite of Spring. What name of Hindi origin is given to a printed cotton cloth which is used in soft furnishing?
Pass.
The elk, Alces is known by what name in northern North America?
Reindeer.
No, the moose. Part of the island group Tierra del Fuego belongs to Argentina. To which country does the other part belong?
Pass.
In the world of antiques, what is a torchère?
It's a light.
Yes, it's a
On the
candle
wall.
stand. It's a stand for a light. According to Mallory, who was the foster father of King Arthur?
Uther Pendragon.
No, Sir Hector. In geography, I've just started to finish. In geography, what Spanish name is usually given to tropical grassland lying between the rainforests and hot deserts of Africa, America, and elsewhere?
Pampas.
No, that's the
Tundra.
American. That is not the tropical one. It is savanna.
Hmm.
And at the end of that round, Mr. Moore, you have scored 13 points. You passed on 4. The more common name for the groundnut earth nut is the commoner garden peanut. The capital, Kinshasa, is the capital of Zaire. The name of Hindi origin, which is given to a printed cotton cloth which is often used for soft furnishing, is chintz. And the other part of Tierra del Fuego belongs to Chile. Mr. Moore, thank you very much. Now, Andrew Panton, please. He's a Glaswegian, living now in Harrogate. He's a civil servant, works for the Ministry of Defence at the US base at Menwith Hill. Scored 6 points on the life and works of Christopher Isherwood, to be lying in joint 3rd place. Your general knowledge question starting now. Who has been Chancellor of West Germany since 1982?
Cole.
Correct. Who was crowned King of Scots in 1306 and defeated the English at Bannockburn in 1314?
Malcolm.
No, Robert the Bruce. The tennis player Martina Navratilova is now an American citizen, but in which country was she born?
Czechoslovakia.
Correct. The ERM is part of the European Monetary System. What does ERM stand for?
European.
No, exchange rate mechanism. Which American film comedian of the silent era became associated with hair-raising situations in films such as Safety Last?
Harold Lloyd.
Correct. In the Arctic, which large bay is connected to the Atlantic Ocean by the Davis Strait?
Hudson.
No, Baffin Bay. Who wrote the children's novel set in the English Civil War entitled The Children of the New Forest? No, it was Captain Marryat. The word dollar is derived from the name of a 16th century German silver coin. What was its German name?
Thaler.
Correct. The early jazz musician and composer Ferdinand Joseph Lamenth Morton was more commonly known by what nickname?
Jelly Roll.
Correct. One of the great festivals of the Catholic Church is observed on the first Thursday after Trinity Sunday. What's it called?
Pass.
The Orient Express was inaugurated in 1883 and 6 years later made its first through run from Paris to which city?
Simplon.
No, Constantinople. The American short story writer William Sidney Porter is best known by what pen name?
Steinbeck.
No, O. Henry. What is the name of the desert between the Gulf of Suez and the Gulf of Aqaba?
Sinai.
Correct. Who was the Tsar of Russia when Napoleon invaded the country in 1812?
Alexander III.
No, the first. Preston is the administrative headquarters of Lancashire, but which city is a county town?
Lancaster.
Correct. In Scotland, what is a button ben?
It's a type of building.
What type?
It's wall and timber and plaster.
No, you haven't got it. It's a very small cottage. What name is given to the process of joining two metal surfaces by raising their temperature sufficiently to melt and fuse them together?
Welding.
Welding is right. At the end of that round, Mr. Panton, you have scored 14 points. You passed on just one. That was on one of the great festivals of the Catholic Church, which is observed on the first Thursday after Trinity Sunday. It is known as Corpus Christi. Mr. Panton, thank you very much. Now, Mr. Brian Daugherty, please, originally a Liverpudlian, living now in Newcastle, a postgraduate student in mathematics at Durham University, specializing in elementary particle theory. Scored 13 points on the history of 20th century astronomy, to be lying in second place at the halfway stage. Your general knowledge question starting now. In 1960, which archbishop became the first president of the Republic of Cyprus?
Macarius.
Correct. Who wrote the fairy tales The Snow Queen and The Ugly Duckling?
Hans Christian Andersen.
Correct. David Dinkins was recently elected mayor of New York. Whom did he succeed?
Koch.
Correct. Which Greek town, the capital of Macedonia, was the base for Allied campaigns in the First World War?
Salonika.
Correct. Which modern English philosopher and mathematician wrote, artists and literary men consider it de rigueur to be unhappy in their marriages, but men of science quite frequently remain capable of old-fashioned domestic bliss?
Russell.
Correct. In thermodynamics, what quantity has a symbol S?
Entropy.
Correct. In Shakespeare's play, what is the name of Hamlet's mother?
Gertrude.
Correct. Which Scottish town in Tayside is known for its salmon ladder and for its annual drama festival?
Dundee.
No, Pitlochry. In the USA, what was adopted by congressional resolution on June the 14th, 1777?
Declaration of
No,
Independence.
the Stars and Stripes. Against which monarch was the Babington plot directed?
Charles II.
No, Elizabeth of England. In 1819, who wrote the poem entitled La Belle Dame sans Merci?
Rossetti.
No, Keats. In music written for bowed string instruments, what does the direction pizzicato mean?
Played with the hands.
Yes, plucked. Which city in northern Italy is the capital of the region of Lombardy?
Milan.
Correct. In the French Revolution, which moderate Republican party was overthrown by the extremist Jacobins in June 1793?
Girondins.
Correct. The annual Iditarod sled dog race is held between Nome and which other Alaskan city?
Fairbanks.
No, Anchorage. Gold and silver articles bear hallmarks. What name is given to marks on pewter?
Pass.
In August 1913, which aerobatic feat was first achieved by Lieutenant Petr Nestorov of the Imperial Russian Flying Corps?
Roll.
No, loop-the-loop. Last October, the Commonwealth Conference was held in which capital city?
Canberra.
No, Kuala Lumpur. Which eminent British biologist, I thought it's all finished, which eminent British biologist from a noted family became the first Director General of UNESCO in 1946?
Huxley.
Yes, so Julian Huxley is correct. And at the end of that round, Mr. Daugherty, you have scored 24 points. You pass on just the one. Gold and silver articles bear hallmarks. The name given to marks on pewter is touch marks. Thank you very much, Mr. Daugherty. And finally, Mr. David Steele, please. Born and bred and living in Carlisle, he's a local government accountant in the accountancy section of Carlisle City Council. Scored 14 points in the life and career of David Lloyd George to be in the lead at the halfway stage. The target you have to beat now is 24, and your general knowledge questions are starting now. In some animals, what is a carapace?
The wrist.
No, it's a hard shell. What was the name of Thailand before 1939?
Siam.
Correct. Bovine means cow-like. What does ovine mean?
Sheep-like.
Correct. What nickname was given to the minority of the Free Church of Scotland which did not amalgamate with the United Presbyterian Church in 1900?
We freeze.
Correct. In 1967, Donald Campbell died in an attempt to break his own world water speed record. On which lake?
Coniston.
Correct. Which Scottish football club's home ground is sometimes called Paradise?
Celtic.
Correct. In which of Shakespeare's plays does the lover say, "It is my soul that calls upon my name"?
Juliet.
No, it was Romeo in Romeo and Juliet. It was in Romeo and Juliet. It was spoken by Romeo. In the late 1950s, who was the overall leader of the successful Commonwealth Transantarctic expedition?
Vivian Fuchs.
Correct. In the geological timescale, what name is given to the period in the Paleozoic era when most of the world's coal was formed?
Ice Age.
No, Carboniferous. By what name is the African ruminant, the camelopard, usually known?
Giraffe.
Correct. Which 17th century religious work describes a journey from this world to that which is to come?
Pilgrim's Progress.
Correct. REM, sleep, is a phase of sleep associated with dreaming. What does REM stand for?
Pass.
What name is usually given to the extreme left-wing group led by Karl Liebknecht and Rosa Luxemburg associated with an abortive revolt of 1919?
Communists.
No, the Spartacus League. Which river rises in Colorado and marks the border between Texas and Mexico?
Rio Grande.
Correct. Which British monarch was the last Emperor of India?
George VI.
Correct. What is the name of the premier award at the annual Television Light Entertainment Festival held at Montreux in Switzerland?
Golden Rose.
Correct. Which British playwright wrote the comedies Fallen Angel and Designed for Living?
Rattigan.
No, Noel Coward. A dhoti is a Hindu loincloth, but what is a dobi?
A kind of bag.
No, an Indian washerwoman. Washerman. Charles Martel was the grandfather of Charlemagne. What's the meaning of his byname Martel?
Pass.
And at the end of that round, Mr. Steele, you have scored 25 points. You passed on just the two, REM, sleep, associated with dreaming. REM stands for rapid eye movement. And the meaning of the byname of Charles Martel was hammer. Mr. Steele, thank you very much. Well, that brings us to the end of a real cliffhanger of a second round, the general knowledge round, and therefore the end of this particular competition. Let us glance at the scores. And in fourth place on 13 points is James Moore. In third place on 14 points is Andrew Pantin. In second place on 24 points is Brian Daugherty. But the last-minute winner with 25 points is the local government accountant from Carlisle, David Steele. Well, that means that David Steele goes through to the semi-finals. Our congratulations to him, our thanks and our commiserations to the other contenders in this evening's program. Well, that was the last of our 16 first-round heats. Next week, we begin the semi-final stage of this year's Mastermind. 16 have qualified outright, including, of course, tonight's winner. But as always, there will be an extra semi-final for the 4 highest-scoring runners-up. Well, that's all for this week. All that it remains for me to do now is to express our thanks to the authorities here at the University of Sheffield for all the kindness and hospitality that they've shown us. Next week, we will be at the University of Manchester for the first of our 5 semi-finals. Until then, from Mastermind at the University of Sheffield, it's goodbye.